Hello everybody, I'm really excited to show you my tricks on that channel, in that YouTube channel, and sharing you in that one, just to start, for something really interesting and helpful for you. I would like to explain you, how to paint faces, and the most interesting will be the differences between painting at 28mm faces comparing with 75. For example, something that you have to keep on mind, it's, in my opinion, always talking by myself, it's how you have to deconstruct everything to represent really excited faces and really interesting talking about the contrast and colors, because everybody knows that when you want to paint 7 layers, maybe at the end you can paint only 3 and will look with not enough contrast, or maybe you are painting with a huge contrast and look messy. So to try to assemble everything, playing with that famous glazing, all that together, I'm going to design my own method and sharing you with you. So the most interesting for you now is trying to deconstruct everything in geometrical shapes. So the face, in my opinion, always talking by myself, it's how you have to work with a face in general, so 75 and 28mm. So when you want to paint at 28mm, you have to think that you need to add a lot of contrast in a really small space. So you won't have enough room to play, and you need to add a huge contrast with really tiny brush strokes. So if you see, I'm not talking about glazing, because if you know me, and a lot of people know my technique, you have to play with capibases or with thick layering. So this is something completely wrong if you heard that, because a lot of people will explain you that you have to make mixes with a lot of water or with another dilutions or just with, I don't know, crazy stuff. And the truth is, if you paint with the correct colors or correct paints, will be enough without water or just with few. What is the idea working in that? It's covering with every layer perfectly, and in that way you will have a really high saturation on every color. This is really interesting, because once time you understand how to work in that way, you will see how you can build everything just starting with the first shadow going up. So the idea with my method, instead of thinking like, okay, you have to paint the midtone, then go back and then go up, so the idea will be painting. Instead of painting the midtone, it's trying to paint here the first shadow or the second shadow. The idea is starting with something darker. So you will see perfectly on that tutorial how I work with a really deep blue. And then the idea is just going up, every layer higher than the previous one. So once time you work in that way, you will see how you improve really quick everything on your miniatures. And then how we have to blend. The idea blending will come later with airbrush. I have some surprises how to blend with airbrush. Another interesting idea when you want to paint in 28mm, it's what kind of style you want to represent, because it's not the same painting with my method or painting with GW style or other kind of painters styles. So everyone has their own tricks or their own mindset and ideas to work. So the most interesting is just choose one or choose two and try to learn from them and then improve your own style. So my idea to you, it's sharing all my tools, my techniques, my knowledge with you, but always trying to share my tools. So I don't want to explain you how to copy my style. I would like to explain you everything to improve your own style. So my method or my ideas will be giving you the tools that you need to improve. So now, because it's time to start painting, here you have the examples how I'm going like to start painting. The first idea, use your previous base coat, so the base coat that we designed, our first shadow, and painting or mixing with the first highlighting. If you see, the contrast is a huge highlighting, so this is the reason why I'm going to mix them together, both between 50% from each one or 70 and 30, it's up to you. But the most interesting will be have a nice contrast to paint the layering. And if you see, I'm not using water, or if you want to use water, it will be few, just that. I don't want to see glazing everywhere because you will waste your time. So this is why I've decided to design that method or this knowledge and share with everybody, because I was painting a lot of years as professional and I've decided to share everything with all of you. So in that one, the first idea, if you see, high contrast, in the first layering with thick layers. Why? Because you will see perfectly the color. You will see everything. And with that color, that layering, you will repaint the 90% of the previous layer. In that way, you will see how you will draw everything that you need to paint. For example, just painting from the first shadow going up, you will draw at the same time the glazing, the layering, the contrast, the saturation, everything. Because the idea with that is keep the base coat that we painted only where we want to represent the outlining or the deepest shadows. So for that reason, you will have to check what kind of places you have to keep that shadows. For example, near of the nose, near of the lips, on the teeth, near of the eyes, areas where you have detail. Every detail should have an outlining, and then the edge highlighting, but this will come later. Now, the most interesting is draw everything with the outlining. Once time we have the outlining made it, you will see how your miniature looks incredible. And then it's just going up to increase the volume. To explain you some tricks about the faces, it's, for example, if you have to paint something bigger, like talking about 75mm or a bust, maybe you have other ideas and maybe you can skip some layering or do something different and will work because it's bigger. But what happens when we have something like that? Really small, 28mm. So the miniature is so small and the face smaller than you think. So how we have to improve it? To have in contrast, to have enough layering and keep everything with enough saturation. The idea is deconstruct the face in two areas. The forehead will be like a sphere. And then we have the rest of the face, that area where we have the details, eyes, nose, lips, like a cylinder. And with that idea, that theory, you can understand that if you want to paint the light is coming in front of your model, will be so easy because you will keep the layering with the lights here in that area. But if you want to represent an OSL, magic lighting, or something came in from another side, if you want to represent that layer should have there, just paint the layer is there with the highest highlighting. Just that, and that area will come with midtones or shadows. That's the idea. Once time you deconstruct everything with geometrical shapes, you will see how you can improve really quick, and you will discover how you can add many OSLs on your miniatures. Once time you understand that, you will see how paint an OSL is so easy, like non-metallic metal. In the same way, I'm going to explain you that theories, OSLs, non-metallic metals, and everything. So give me a like, give me that support that everybody needs in that YouTube channel, and just help us to continue improving and sharing all our knowledge. And again, enjoy painting, and I hope you can do something really great with that knowledge. Remember, the idea with the layering, if you start with the base coat really dark and then going up, you will have to add many layers in the same places. So if we can't paint with glazing, at least now, how we can add enough gradients with enough contrast and with a nice quality? The truth is, at the beginning it will look awful. For sure, this is something that you have to understand because it's a sketch. So once time you understand that you are painting a sketch, you will understand perfectly what I'm doing. At the end of the tutorial, you will see easy what I've decided to work in that way, because at the end, everything will be melted or blended with enough nuances, tonalities, colors, and crazy stuff at the end. But at the beginning, we have to build everything. We have to decide what kind of volumes should have higher contrast, less, more definition, or less. So now think about the shapes that I explained you. And then every layer that you will add, remember that you have the option to play in a lot of ways. So you have the option to play with higher contrast or just turning the temperature. So it's not the same playing with a cold temperature at the beginning and then moving to something colder, without talking about contrast, about the value, just playing with the contrast, about the temperature. It's so different. It's in the same way if I'm talking about contrast between glossy, satin, and matte. So we have several ways to represent the contrast. This is why I would like to share with all of you my knowledge, because I was painting many years and I would like to try to deconstruct everything in the easiest way to improve your skill. So if you see in that tutorial, I was painting just with really easy contrast. Just painting with the next color, painting something higher, and moving to the center of the face. Why? Because as I said, for me, it's like a cylinder. So I would like to move every layer, going inside, going to the center of the face. For me, the center in that case, it's the center of the face. But if you want to paint, for example, that side as the center of that cylinder, could be in the same way. So you will have to paint here the highest highlighting and then the midtones and shadows around that cylinder. So keep attention on that because it's the key. So you see that just with 2-3 layers, I have defined everything really, really easy. Once time I have something like that, it's time to continue adding more colors. Why? In other places where I didn't paint. For example, teeth, lips, eyes. What kind of color I have to use? In that case, because I was painting with something colder, because my idea was like he was in snow base, something like that, I've decided to play with cold colors, cold temperature on each one. Later I'm going to play with more colors, more shades, and you will see how I will turn the tonalities. But now, the most idea is trying to play with a color palette in the same temperature. If you're playing with cold temperature, all of them with cold. If you're playing with warm temperature, play with warm temperature, all of them. Because if you start playing with the most saturated oranges and then the most saturated blue, maybe you will play with the complementary color and will look awesome. But maybe it will look really, really weird if you want to move that miniature in a snow base. Keep that on your mind because it's really important. Think about the temperature at the same time that we are thinking about the contrast with the value. So playing with black color and white colors. So every color should have the temperature correct and the value correct. How to control them. The truth, at the beginning, this is another trick. Don't care. Just that. Don't care. Just paint. Paint, going up, trying to represent every shape correct. And then I'm going to explain you some tricks how to move everything to the temperature that you want and with the value that you want. Bam! That's the trick, and this is why I like to share my knowledge in that way. Because as I said, I would like to explain you the most interesting tricks on every miniature. And if you see, just painting with the number 1 of my brush, I'm not using 000 or crazy stuff brushes like that. For me, it doesn't make sense. Always I'm playing with number 1 and number 2. Just that. Easy. Why? Because for me, with a thick brush, you can load correctly your brush, or you can load correctly the paint in your brush. And then you will paint easy with enough weight, with enough color. And at the end, the miniature will look saturated with enough value, with enough everything. So that's something amazing. Because at the beginning, or at least the previous way to work was with glazing 2 thin layers, 3 thin layers, always with thin layers. What happened? At the end, you spent a week just to paint, for example, the face. And maybe you don't like it because you don't have enough contrast, or you don't have enough color or value or define it or something else. So if you are painting with a sketch, you will see easier how to work because you will see faster. And then once time you have did it, it's time to play with airbrush, to blend, to assemble everything and represent correctly the gradient. So here you have an example. So you can see perfectly how I was painting with my airbrush. The idea to work in that way, it's painting now with airbrush with different colors. For example, greens, magentas, oranges, whatever you want. So don't care about the color that you use. So if you play with blues, remember that if you are playing with oranges, will be the complementary color. Instead of that you will have gray at the end, play with yellows, greens, red. Colors like that could be really interesting. But instead of red that everybody has on mind, try to think on magenta as primary color. Because with magenta, it's the real red. You will have different kind of blues, turquoises, violets, colors like that. So you won't have a desaturated color. You will increase with more and more temperature and more color every miniature. So that one, it's everything about that tutorial. I hope you have enjoyed watching that. I hope you can share with your friends, give me likes, share, post a comment and ask me everything that you want, and I will try to do videos about your questions. So again, thank you very much to watch that, and see you in next video tutorial. Bye bye!